Streaming from the NSU Fish. Good evening. I'm Dr. Grace Telesco, and welcome to the Criminal Justice Forum. We're live streaming from the NSU Fischler College of Education and School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel. Each of our programs examine exciting topics in the field of criminal justice, and all of our guests bring fascinating and thought-provoking topics to life, as each of our educational programs bridge the gap between theory and practice. Welcome to the Criminal Justice Forum. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Dr. Grace Telesco here from the Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice. Let me enable closed captions for those folks who are viewing from home. And I'm very excited because our guest tonight is Chief Carol Presson. We've had her on before, and we asked her if she'd come back and this time talk a little bit about effective police leadership. And so let me introduce my guest tonight, and I'd like to call my friend, Chief Carol Presson. We'll see when she comes on if she thinks that I, too, am her friend. We'll see. But I'm just kidding. So Chief Carol Presson has been in law enforcement for 27 years. She began her career in 1995, graduating from the Illinois State Police Local Recruit Academy. Carol's career started in the city of Madison, Illinois, where she served as a patrol officer and a juvenile officer. In 1997, she moved to the Madison County Sheriff's Office, where she served in patrol as a juvenile officer. We're going to just stop that because we don't need to see Tiffany just yet. Okay. She was also a field training officer, and Chief Presson rose through the ranks after being transferred to the investigation division, ending her career as the first female lieutenant. Carol specialized in child abuse, sex crimes, homicide investigation, major case squad, child death investigation task force, Madison County Task Force for Minority Recruitment Training Coordinator for the Southwestern Illinois Police Academy. I need oxygen. I have to catch my breath. There's so much in there, right? In 2021, Chief Carol Presson returned to active law enforcement, becoming the first, listen to this, first female chief of police for the City of Highland, Illinois. Please help me welcome my guest tonight, Chief Carol Presson. Thank you so much, Chief, for being with us.
Hello, thank you. And yes, you are my friend. And I do appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. You know, we share a lot in common. You've rose through the ranks all the way to the top, as far as you could go in that particular police department. And I know that it's been challenging, right? It was challenging as a woman in policing, being a police officer, as a female, having a career and a family and being a mother. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like for you early on in your career as a police officer?
Well, I think, early on it was difficult because I was the first female in my original department. When I started with the City of Madison, I was the first female ever hired with that department to begin with. And so that was a little difficult for me. A lot of the men didn't necessarily want to work with a woman, and they made that pretty clear. It took a little bit of time, but I did finally gain their trust and their friendships. And a lot of them, we are all still friends to this day. And it's just, and I've talked about it a lot. I travel around the country teaching women in command. And what's one of the things that we talk about a lot is some of the barriers that women have in law enforcement. And while it's better, I think, than it was, I'm in my 28th year, and it's better, but it's still there. But it is better than it was. And then just trying to, or feeling like you have to prove yourself all the time. And it's a different environment for women than it is for men.
Yeah, it is. And you started again, the year of that was, let's see, 1995. So that's like 12 years after I started out, 1983. So everybody at home could figure out that I'm way older than you, right? So in 1983, I was 23 years old. I joined the police department, and there was like very few women, very few women. In fact, there wasn't a locker room for us. There was no female locker room, and you had to change in the bathroom. No one wanted to work with you. Just like you said, I walked a foot patrol a lot because nobody wanted to work with me. And it's so interesting because you really have to earn trust. Meanwhile, earn trust, earn respect from your peers. While our male counterparts, it's just kind of assumed that you belong here until you prove otherwise. And it's the opposite for females. Would you agree that, it's like, no, you don't belong here until you prove otherwise?
Right. And that is true. And I think it's true not only in the ranks, but also in the communities. When you'd go to a call and show up as a woman, the trust of the community wasn't as quick as it was when a man showed up, depending on the situation. So you really did kind of get it from both angles. And then you have family issues, and you have all of these things, the obstacles that we as women in law enforcement have to overcome. And it's not to, we work with great men. I love the guys that I work with, but they don't have the same journey that we have. And so it is difficult, and it's still difficult. I'm, 28 years in, and I still walk into a room of commanders and I'm the only woman in the room. So we're still making progress, but we're not all the way there yet.
Yeah. So they talk about that glass ceiling, and, and you've shattered it in terms of your police department, but then there's this isolation because you're all alone. You're there, you've shattered the ceiling, fine, but now you're kind of up there by yourself. And so while it's good in one way that you're the first female chief, there's not the same kind of mentoring that you would have experienced had you been a male chief. Am I right?
Yeah, it is different. But I will say, a lot of my friends have come up through the ranks with me in all kinds of departments, in all the different departments in our area. In Madison County, which is where I sit, there are 40 police departments. And I am good friends with a lot of those men. And fortunately for me, I have been able to build relationships with them. But it is still different. I went to a criminal justice summit not too long ago, and I probably could count on, one hand the number of women. I think there were 3 of us, 2 that we didn't know. I didn't know either of them. And so by 9 o'clock, when, everybody was hanging out and having fun, I separated myself and I left. And part of that is just because I have to protect my reputation. I have to protect, it's different. It is different. The guys can have a different level of camaraderie than I can have with them. It's a different animal.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say that the feeling of being made to prove yourself, that was sort of short-lived for me anyway. In my experience, it was short-lived. So like maybe the first year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years. But then after that, as I rose through the ranks, then there was I had no problems. I had no problems at all with getting along with anybody. More women were coming on the job at that time. Yes, the more I rose through the ranks, the less there were other female sergeants, other female lieutenants, etc. Right. But I think that overall, it was definitely a challenge for me. But early on, not the whole career, and I think that as people get to know you, and I think that's true of any profession.
I agree. I do. I think when I started, it was more difficult. And then the longer I was around, people knew me. They knew my work ethic. They knew that they could trust me, that I did a good job. I mean, it just, to me, it was just one of those things. It took them a little longer. But now nobody has any issues with the fact that I'm a woman, even as a chief. It's funny because I've even had people in the community, walk up to introduce themselves to me, and they'll lean over and, I had one older gentleman look at me and said, "Man, it's about time," and he was thankful that I was there. So it's good. It's good.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit. Talking about effective leadership, and before the show started, I was telling you that we have a pretty famous saying in NYPD anyway, as far as when we're talking about bosses, right? Sergeants, lieutenants, captains, whatever. And we say, oh, they had a very lucky Saturday. And we have civil service exams, in New York anyway. I don't know. What is it like in Highland?
Yeah, we do in Illinois as well. You have to test to get onto the department, and then you have to test by rank. And especially in municipalities, it normally goes by your score, your overall score. Sheriff's departments can promote who they want, kind of thing, once you pass the test. But you're right. There are people that can take a test and they do very, very well, and probably shouldn't be in a leadership role. It happens. It happens a lot. I did not have to do that to be the chief. It was a different process. But everyone else, whenever we do promotions, they have to test.
Yeah. In New York, it's the same in terms of a civil service rank goes all the way up to captain, but then after that, it's by appointment. So deputy inspector, inspector, deputy chief, and then chief finally. But how, there's so many bosses that over my 20-year career that I came across that, didn't embody those leadership characteristics and attributes. What would you say is kind of the most important characteristic or characteristics of effective leadership in policing?
I think, and I've learned this, I think you hit on it as well, that we know the good leaders that we've had and we know the bad leaders that we've had, and you try to take from those people. And I had years ago a friend of mine who was a captain in Ferguson. I was talking to him one day, and he made a comment to me, and he said, you have to give people something to follow. And it was during the riots, and there were some conversations, but to me, I took that to heart, and it was, I want to be able to give people at least the direction of where I want them to go. And I want to give them something to follow. And so I always, I do the best I can to make sure my people always come first. I'm very inclusive. I take their best attributes and I give them something to work for. I include people in decision making. I mean, obviously I have to make the final decision, but I always give them a voice. I remember when I started and I'd be sitting in my office and people would not come past the threshold of my office. They would stand outside the door and they would talk at me through the front threshold. Well, the other day I was sitting in my office, and it's been a year. I've been the chief for a year. And I had 3 officers in my office, and we were just talking about stuff, like things going on. And I learned that just being approachable to them, I have also learned, I worked for a person years ago who always thought he was the hardest working person in the room, and didn't, always thought he had to know everything. And, I learned that I want to take the traits from my people that they're good at and let them develop those traits. I don't have to know how to do everything. I just need to surround myself with people who are good at their job. And I have found that our productivity is up. People's attitudes are good. Everybody seems that they're happy, that they know that they're appreciated. And it's, I've taken what I can from the best and the worst, and I've tried to kind of meld them all together.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that you've heard of the autocratic or authoritarian leader versus the democratic leader.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that I'm a democratic leader, but the truth is that I'm a democratic leader, kind of a closeted authoritarian leader. Like, so example, when I was commanding officer of behavioral science at the police academy, and I had 50 instructors, and we would get into a room. We would talk about some stuff that was really important. I'd lay out the problem. Here's the problem. They'd come up with some solutions. And then I would say, okay, but this is the way we're going to go. And then afterwards they say, Lou, because that's what they say in NYPD. I don't know what they say in Illinois. Do they say LT or
yeah,
what?
They say LT. Yeah.
They say LT. Yeah, over there in New York, we say Lou. So they'd say, Lou, why do you even ask us what we think? Because you really don't care. You're going to do what you want anyway. And, it's just like, that's kind of true. So I'm kind of like autocratic / democratic, but I have a vision, and I'm hoping that you'll get on board with me about it. Right. So how do you balance the autocratic or authoritarian leader with the democratic style?
I think for me, it's the gift of persuasion, right? I go into things a lot, and I know what I want to do. And sometimes they'll change my mind because of, one of the downsides to coming into a department where you never worked, right? I did not rise through the ranks at Highland. I was hired as an outside candidate. And so I lost the perspective of history. I have no historical perspective of the Highland Police Department. And so a lot of times when I call people in, it's because I know what I want to do. And if it's been tried before, if it failed, if there's something else that I'm not considering, a lot of times the guys will bring that to me and they'll say, well, we've got this, or they'll tell me some things, and that's helpful. But I've also been pretty good at having visions and being able to persuade them to kind of see things my way, right? And I do meet in the middle a lot. I also sometimes give in, and then if it doesn't work, then I can do the way I want. Like, we're small enough that the decisions that we make, it's not difficult to undo them. If it's about safety or anything like that, I don't allow for error, or I try not to allow for error. But other things, I know that if we try something and it doesn't work, it doesn't take an act of God to change it back. And I know that's different in, agencies like NYPD. By the time you make a change and then you put that out to however many tens of thousands of officers, it's really hard to reverse it. It's a little bit different for me with that.
Yeah. I think another thing that is powerful for a leader is, and you said it, like, follow you. Like, so lead by example, right? So not be afraid of getting my hands dirty, not being afraid of doing the work, not being afraid to delegate, but more importantly, being part of the team and showing the way. So to be a way shower, I think, is important. And I think that that's how you gain the trust and the respect of the rank and file. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with that. I always, I do the best that I can to make sure that the decisions that I'm making, that I can look back and I can say this was the right thing to do. And it's not always popular. But one of the things I've always told everybody is that if you are making the decisions that you make, and you make them for the right reason, whether it turns out okay or not, we'll work through it. And those are the things that I do. I also find that jumping in and helping out sometimes. I got all excited the other day because I was directing traffic. That was the closest thing to police work I've done in a year. And I was standing out directing traffic while they were making an arrest. And I had guys come up to me and go, "Hey, Chief, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm directing traffic." And I was all excited. And they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. I'm like, it just, I do the best that I can to be a part. I have no problem kicking in and helping out. But at the end of the day, when I make a decision, I think they've all kind of learned that I'm going to do it for what I believe to be the right reason. And it's not personal. It's not for political reason. It's not because I'm afraid I'm going to get fired in 2 years when my contract's up. Although that thought covers my mind sometimes, but it's just the right reason. I try to do things for the right reason. And so far, nothing has happened that we can't fix.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So back to authoritarian versus democratic. What I've found, and I'd like to know what you think about this, is that when there's a crisis, when something is happening, that sort of, critical incident, traumatic event, whatever it is, whether it be active shooter, whether it be a 9/11, whether it be a hurricane, whatever it is, where it's crisis mode. This isn't time for egalitarian decision making. This isn't time for us to huddle and take a straw poll and how many people feel like they should, go to that corner. No, that's why you're a leader. Right. So during crisis situations, do you find that the authoritarian approach is the only way to go?
I do. And, it's funny. One of the guys that work with me now, I worked with him when I was the commander of the the child death task force. And we always laugh because he'll say, he goes, the first time I met you, he goes, I walked into a room and you were barking orders to everybody about get this done, and get this done. And he said, it was a very no nonsense moment. And he said, but you knew what you were doing. And then he laughs because he did tell me, don't get all female on me, and kind of broke the mood. It was kind of funny because I was mad because they had screwed something up. And anyway, but you have to be able to do both. And I know you have to know the time and place, right? And not everything, you're right, not everything can be democratic and not everything you're going to get a vote on. When it comes down to the time where, I have to take charge or whatever, I will take charge. And I think that they understand that, and they know the difference. There's a reason, and you said it, there's a reason that I'm in the position that I'm in. And I'm hoping that over the last, year plus, that they've learned how to trust me, that I'm going to do what's right, and what's in their best interest and in the best interest of the community.
Exactly. I want to tell a little story if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So during 9/11, and when I say 9/11, I mean like the whole year and a half, from the moment that the first plane hit the towers till all the way till, they decided to close the Family Assistance Center. So there was a memorial, and it was just for the families. There was about 5,000 people in attendance, and it was right at Ground Zero, this memorial. It was probably televised. People probably remember this, seeing it on TV. And they gave each family member a flag on behalf of the city and an urn. But in that urn was Ground Zero, really Ground Zero dirt, not remains. And it was done as a token on the mayor. It was the mayor's idea to do this, to give each family member. Okay. So they assign me and all of my cops, 150 officers, to distribute the flags and the urns to each family member. Well, not each family member, but the family, each family unit. Now, our guys were told to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning. We were there from 6 o'clock in the morning, and this went all the way until, by the time we finished distributing, imagine 5,000 people, and making like a very powerful statement to each family, on behalf of the city of New York, we present you with, and, so it was very, very solemn, very respectful. But my guys were burnt out. They were burnt out. They had been there since 6 o'clock in the morning. Plus, they had been there at Ground Zero every day for months. So it was around 11 o'clock at night, and we were in this family center, and there was a bunch of leftover flags and urns. So the captain comes to me and he says, all right, I want you to get your guys and start packing up the urns and the flags into the truck. And they're going to store this in a warehouse. I said, it's 11 o'clock at night. My guys are toast. It's time for them to go home. And he said, no, they're going to do this. They're going to start putting all of these urns and flags into the truck. I said, no, they're not. They're going home. He said, I'm giving you a direct order. I took my shield off and I handed it to him. And I said, I resign. And then he backed up. And I didn't do this to be in a challenging way. I was saving my people.
Right.
I saw this as if bullets were flying and I had to protect my guys. Yeah. And when I say guys, I mean guys and girls, sure. Of course. He backed up. He said, fine. And he walked away. I didn't do that to gain respect from my guys at all. And in fact, I was like really ready. I was also toast. So I was also burnt out. And I think that I was ready to quit, but to me, that was the last straw for their mental health. When I tell you that story, and I'm not going to be hurt or upset if you chastise me, because I don't want to send the message. Look, I don't want to send the message that we should be disrespectful, because I'm very paramilitary. I believe in the needs of the service. I believe in hierarchy. Your son is in the Navy. That's why you're wearing that really awesome Navy jacket. Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very much into respect, and I don't think that we should challenge authority. But in that case, I felt it was a matter of life and death for the mental health of my guys. What do you think about it? What do you think about that story?
I hear that story, and it gives me I have great respect for you to begin with. But it gives me greater respect for you just because, I am a believer that our people are the most important thing that we have. And no matter what that takes, we need to take care of them. And that doesn't mean that they're always going to be happy. And it doesn't mean that you're always going to give them their way. But what that means is that I'm going to step in front of a bullet for you. And that's what you did. And I think that's important. And I think, I've watched different leaders and different commanders get in front of the media storm and support their people. I have watched people that I've worked with that used them as a human shield, right? And to me, I will go down fighting for my people if I have to. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to cover for somebody if they've done something wrong. It just means that, they're the most important thing I have. And if I'm going to take care of them, and that's important to me. Their mental health means more to me than anything. And in that instance, what you did, I think took a great deal of courage. And I think that anybody watching that probably thought you were a badass, and they would have, backed you to the wall. And I appreciate the fact that you say, I didn't do that to get accolades, or I didn't do that to gain respect. That's just who you are. And I think once people realized that about you, they would have gone to the end of the earth for you as well. And that's all you can ever want. And hope that you've earned it, and that you deserve it, and the same for them.
Yeah. And again, I don't want to advocate, because we have a lot of our criminal justice students that are watching. We have a lot of our PhD students. Some of our undergrads are actually on with us. We'll get a chance to see them in a minute later on as we open up for Q&A. But I don't want anybody walking away from this thinking that it's okay to talk back to, your superiors. Of course it isn't, but you pick your battles. You know, and this was really important because my guys had been working now for months and months, 14-hour tours. And, you know, the mental health deleterious outcomes there for them was pretty serious. As time went on later on, two officers that worked for me committed suicide.
Oh gosh.
So, you know, we're talking about their mental health and stretching them and asking cops to do things that psychologists, funeral directors should be doing. Not, you know, we ask a lot of our police, don't you think?
Yes, I do. I think that, you know, I think as a society, we're not really sure what we want out of police. And we are probably the only profession, and I think we are the only profession on the planet that has to go from, you know, kissing babies and shaking hands to chasing people and getting shot at and getting in fights and then turning around and helping a little old person who can't, you know, doesn't know where they're at or whatever. And we have always been expected, like light switches. Like people just think that we have that ability. And I think, you know, when you talk about like what your guys went through and you know, what we've, you know, all gone through with scenes and the things that we've seen, you know, the cumulative PTSD that we all suffer, and we have it. Like there is no way around saying, you know, I worked with dead babies and abused kids for 17 years of my career. There is no way that did not affect me. No way, right? And we just expect that, you know, and I've read it and it just makes me sick. Well, you signed up for it. No, not exactly true, right? Like I signed up to be in law enforcement. I wanted, you know, to help people and be good to people, and I wanted to protect people. But all of that, all the things that come with that, we don't let people see, right? That's our job, is to protect the community and protect society from what is out there. And you know, when you know, especially now, I think it's the pendulum is swinging back, I think. But there for a while, when everybody thought we were horrible human beings, it just broke my heart. Because I know we're not, and I know what we're made of because I've worked with thousands of police officers. I know exactly what we're made of.
Yes.
And they do expect a lot from us.
Yeah. I don't know what you have in Highland Police Department, but we had something called CompStat, comparative statistics.
Yep.
And it's all about crime. It's all about reducing crime. It's all about gun arrests, taking guns off the street, taking the drugs off the street, you know, that kind of thing. Violent crime, making sure we reduce violent crime, and holding captains or commanders responsible and accountable. Do you have something like that?
You know, no. And you know, I'm not much of a numbers guy, and I know that CompStat was a lot of numbers. And I think, you know, the kind of communities that we have here, and you know, we base a lot of our reduction in crime and our ability to reduce crime more on community policing styles than we do on statistics. Like I am, you know, I am a big data person. I believe in data-driven law enforcement. You know, you go where the numbers are. You know, I believe in harm spots versus hot spots and things of that nature. And so we're a small enough agency that I can look at the numbers and see how things go. But that to me is not the end all be all of how we police our community.
Yeah, because I mean, there's something to be said about CompStat and its effectiveness, but I also was privy to observing how much they would lean on the commanders for numbers. And, you know, remember we were saying earlier that there's civil service promotion. So you go up to the rank of captain, but then anything above captain is going to be an appointment. Well, that appointment is going to depend on your numbers. So what does that do? What message does that send? And there was chiefs, the chief of the department or chief of patrol, that would say things like this statement to the commanders, a room filled with 50 captains, and say something like, I want your guys to go out there and shake the trees.
Yeah.
And you go, what are you talking about? Are you talking about what about Fourth Amendment? Terry stop? What are you talking about?
And I know that obviously I wasn't there, but I do know that there were some issues with Terry stops being overused, and there were some problems. And, you've got to be very careful with that. And what you're doing is you're showing your people that it's not the quality of their work that matters. It's the quantity of their work that matters. I could tell all of my guys, I expect you to write 50 traffic tickets this week. And they're going to go out and write people for stuff they wouldn't. And what happens is that, and this is my opinion, you lose the legitimacy of your agency. When the only thing that you're concerned about is what your numbers look like, people no longer see you as a legitimate police agency. And, there's nothing wrong with making stops for safety or getting out and talking to people. But I'm not a numbers guy. I never was a numbers guy. When I came on, I talked to the guys. They asked me what I expected. And I just told them, I said, I expect you to be out. I expect you to be talking to people, checking on your business owners. I want you to go and, go to the park and watch kids play football if you want. I don't care what you do, but I want you to be a part of your community. And I said, because, you are only as good as your relationship with the people that you serve. And, and I've watched it. I've worked major homicides in large police agencies where the community would not talk to the police. And that's a problem. And I think part of that comes from that mentality of everybody's going to jail. Like it shouldn't, my opinion, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I saw what it did to morale.
Yeah.
I saw what it did to the captain. And now the captain came back to the command, and that whole thing went downhill.
Yeah.
And including the morale and then including the manipulation of numbers, the manipulation of reporting. Oh, no, it's not a burglary. It's a larceny. No, that's not, that's not a third degree assault. It's just, it's just harassment. Why? Because the numbers. Right. So, there's something to be said. I mean, I am a quantitative individual. I like quantitative, and I'm much more comfortable with quantitative, but I'm with you. I understand. I think that we can get lost in the counting, and then we become focused on that instead of the quality of life, the larger goal, which is working with the community. And I'm so glad you brought it up.
There's such a bigger picture, right? Like, we talk about our relationship with our communities and why, some have problems or whatever. And I think that that's part of it. I think when, your focus is always finding something wrong or choosing the bad, you miss what comes from positive community relationship. And, that's important to me. And I've worked in both kinds of areas. And I just found that you get more out of your people. There's only so many cops on the street, right? And you can't be everywhere. And so you hope that the people that you serve are willing to help you serve them. And that's part of having this good relationship with your community. And it doesn't mean, that you're not going to arrest people, or you're not going to write traffic tickets or whatever, but it just means that the time. And it's not because the chief said, I need you to write 50 traffic tickets a week. Right.
Exactly. You bring up about the relationship with the community. And we know that when we say the word community, we have to operationally define what that means. Like All right, community. What do you mean by community? There's a lot of communities within communities.
Mhm.
So what are we talking about when we say the community? First of all, and maybe you could talk about your specific community and what it looks like, what it feels like, and then how do you bridge that big gap between the police and the community? How do you make it mend? If it needed mending at all, maybe it didn't.
Yeah, I've got to tell you, and I am blessed. I come from a community that they love their law enforcement. And we are a larger version of Mayberry. Everybody, we have a really good community. That's not to say that we don't have issues with some groups or whatever we do, but I will tell you that the men and women that work at my department, their relationships and their communication with the people in our community is really what I think kind of bridges those gaps, because they do understand the concept of acting respectful until they shouldn't be respectful, right? Like there's always that moment. We're always involved with our schools. We're always involved with community events, and we put ourselves out there. We don't stay behind the iron gate and not come out until we're called. Like we put ourselves out there for people. Sunday, as a matter of fact, I'm flipping pancakes at the Santa breakfast. So, it's just, we have the kind of community and the kind of relationship with the people. And that is a lot of different, the schools and our council members and the citizens and the business owners. And you're right, it's all communities within communities. And we have a really good just interworking relationship with them.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
The Highland Park shooting.
Yeah.
Is that in your community? Is that
No.
No.
That's north.
Okay.
That's north. But it's, I got a lot of calls about that asking if I was okay. Yeah, that's a different community. That's up north by Chicago. We're closer to St. Louis.
Gotcha. Okay, good. I just for our viewers so that they know the difference there.
We're about 30 miles east of downtown St. Louis. Okay.
In this new era of reimagining policing, and I have a student in my PhD class. I actually happen to think he's on right now. And he talks about modern policing as like this new course that's being offered in his school. Modern policing. Wow, that's an interesting concept. Modern policing. What does that mean exactly? And in light of modern policing and in light of 2022, 2023 policing, we're looking to reimagine how we do things, because the way in which we've done things may not be working and we may need to reconfigure it. What's your thoughts on reimagining policing, modern policing in the year 2023?
That's a good question. And it's a difficult one to answer, right? Because, I look around the country and law enforcement is law enforcement, right? I don't care if you come from an agency of 20 or you come from an agency of 20,000, right? But I think that what's happening now with modern policing is that we, as law enforcement, have become much more educated with issues of race and gender and mental health and things that, when I started and 28 years is nothing, right? I had to have a high school diploma. We didn't have training in how to handle people with mental health crisis. We didn't talk about de-escalation. We didn't talk about those things. And now we do. We didn't talk about differences in gender and all. We just didn't, right? We learned how to drive real fast and shoot guns and defensive tactics, and we learned law. But when it came to the issues of communication, and I've even said it, I've taught for the police academy for about 11 years. And one of the things that I said was, it's nice to see that we are expanding the communication part of our training, because that is our biggest advocate, is learning how to talk to people. And, when we talk about different ethnic backgrounds and different, that was just stuff that we didn't, or at least where I was from, we didn't really make it a big topic, right? It wasn't a hot topic. And now we're looking at those kinds of issues. We're looking at problems with socioeconomic backgrounds, and we're looking at problems with, the different, sociology. And it's changing, right? I think that we as a profession are and should be much more educated, I think, than maybe we used to be. I mean, I can say it for myself. I had a high school diploma when I started. And since then have chosen to, continue my education, and I'm still continuing my education.
Yes, you are. Yes, you
I
are.
am.
And you're in the middle of your PhD. You finished all of your coursework. You attend Walden University, and you are in your proposal phase. So a lot of my PhD students that are watching right now from NSU would probably appreciate some words of wisdom from you. And before we go to the chat, because there's a lot of questions, they're blowing up the chat now. What advice do you have for our incoming? They're not freshmen, but they're incoming new to the PhD in criminal justice program here at NSU, and they're just starting their coursework and all of that. What would you say? Because you're a bit of a veteran in the process. What would you give them as advice, number one? And number two, why does a chief need a PhD in criminal justice?
Okay, let's do the first one. So the first one, the biggest advice, I think, or the best advice that I can give you is, number one, no matter how big of a step you take every day, as long as it's forward, you're making progress, right? Like this is just about me. I have 4 jobs. I have 5 kids, 2 grandkids, and I'm working on my PhD, right? So it's not like I could ever just sit down and spend a week working on one part of it. I couldn't do that. And so I got this mindset where I said to myself that even if I work a half an hour or I work an hour or whatever, at least I'm making progress forward, right? And some days I had more time than others. I'm not going to say I didn't get down sometimes on myself, because I feel like it's taken me a long time. But no matter how long it takes you, it's worth it. It'll be worth it in the end. I'm a true believer that education is the one thing nobody can ever take away from you. And it opens so many doors. As a chief, I wasn't always a chief, right? So I started my my PhD journey while I was still, I retired from the sheriff's department, and I took a job full-time faculty with our local college and police academy. And I decided when I was there, I had a master's degree. I had been sort of encouraged to get my master's degree years ago. And then I thought about it, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to go all the way. And so that's what I did. And when the job came up to be the chief, it actually was kind of a topic. I think it was one of the reasons, it wasn't the only reason I got my job, but I think it was a big reason, right? My education, and I've said this before, that, when you have experience, you're a powerful creature. When you have an education, you're a powerful creature. But when you combine those two, there's no stopping you. And I have said that if for whatever reason, I signed a 3-year contract, if in 2 years the city decides that they want to go a different direction, I'll pick up my PhD and what then will be 30 years of law enforcement experience, and I can guarantee you that I will find a different path. It's
Absolutely.
just, yeah, I mean, and of all the things, I didn't come from, my background was not the best. And I just wanted to do the best I could with everything that I've done. And so now I'm in law enforcement. I made it to the level of chief. I can't wait for them to call me Chief Carol PhD. That's how I'm going to sign all my stuff. Because it's just, to me, it was just, I'm not stopping till I get there. And
yeah, great.
So,
great.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So, Joey, I'm going to call you up. My illustrious production team in the background. Joey, there's Joey, my project manager.
Hello.
Joey, we have so many questions. They are blowing up the chat. Can we start off with one of the questions for the chief?
Of course, yes. So the first one comes from Margot Hallman. They ask, what did you believe the most challenging issue facing police leadership now and going forward is, and how do you address those things before it turns into something else?
I think one of the biggest things right now with, police leadership has always been, it's one of those things that you've got to be willing to take the hit, right? And I believe that the best leaders can do that. And I think one of the most concerning issues that I see, and this, again, a lot of the things that I say are my opinion, is the portrayal that law enforcement has on media, not just the news media, right? But television and movies and all of these kind of things. I think that we have created a vision of law enforcement that is not always true. And as leaders, I think we struggle with trying to change that view. And it can be difficult sometimes. That's where, like I said, we make sure that we get out in the communities and that we talk to our people. I make sure that my people are trained and educated and that they act the way they're supposed to act. And that is difficult. It's hard when you show up at a scene and people are screaming at you that you're going to shoot their children or that you're going to do, and I think the media in all of its aspects is really hurting law enforcement.
Yes, agreed. I think that the media can become a force multiplier to further divide the police and the community.
Absolutely.
So, Michaela, now, by the way, that was Joseph Jasinski, and he's an accounting major. He's a senior at Nova Southeastern University, and he's my right-hand guy. And here's another hand of mine, Michaela Porter, who is a biology major, and she works with us as well. Michaela, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes. So the question I'm reading is from Jody Hayes. So after hearing Dr. T's story, if men were to say something like this to you, how do you think you would react? And also, would you gain the respect for the men and women who work on the force, or would you be annoyed or shocked that this person said something that you didn't like to you?
Okay, so I think
Good
what
question.
You're talking about is if somebody was insubordinate to me. I'm not going to say that that's never happened, right? Because not quite in I think the gravity of Dr. T's situation was much more than I will ever deal with, the whole concept of 9/11. But when you're talking about, insubordination, like I've been called out on situations where I was wrong, and I took it And then behind closed doors, I reminded people, don't talk to me like that. Right. And then I have been called out or attempted to be called out on things where I wasn't wrong. And I stood my ground. I am not a pushover by any means, but I am also not a person that is not capable of admitting fault. And that to me is a huge thing. I know that I don't know everything, that I'm not the best at everything. And I think that's a big part of that, right? Like, there's a time and a place to be confronted, and then there's a time and a place not to. And so you just have to know the difference.
I also agree. Too.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if that was, it was insubordinate, and that's true. It was, but you know, it was one of those things like we never talked about it ever. And he continued to respect me and trust me and think highly of me and all of that. So I think that it was one of those crisis moments, if you will, where you're on the battlefield and, you know, it's kind of like a Saving Private Ryan moment or something.
Right.
And so, nothing ever really went down and happened around that. Thank God. I guess good, lucky me.
You know, and I've got a quick story. I'll tell you, it was funny.
Please.
The first time I was ever truly insubordinate to a superior, and I was on a hostage negotiation. I was doing a hostage negotiation, and it had taken me all of 45 minutes to get this guy calmed down. And he was holding a woman hostage at gunpoint, and I had been talking him down. And he finally said, "I need a beer." And we were in a trailer park, like a mobile home trailer park. And I yelled out to the guys, I said, "Somebody knock on a door and get me a beer. There's a beer somewhere in this trailer park." And they did. They brought me a beer, and I took it to the front, and I told him, I said, it's me. I'm walking up. I'm going to put the beer on the porch, and I'm going to back away. I put the beer on the porch. He got the beer. About that time, a sergeant, I was a patrolman at the time, and a sergeant pulled up and got out of his car, smacked the side of the trailer, and yelled at this guy and said, and pardon my language, and I won't use all of it, but he said, "You know, you're pissing me off. Get out of here." All of the work that I had done in 45 minutes to bring this guy down, this sergeant took him all the way back up. And I walked up to the sergeant and I told him, I said, "I need you to get your ass off my scene." And he looked at me, he goes, "You need to remember who you're talking to." I said, "Well, we'll talk about it later." And he left. And everybody was there and everybody heard it. And he pulled me aside the next day and he goes, "You were right, but don't ever talk to me like that again." Okay. And that was the end of it. But it was just that moment. And I feel kind of like you know, not quite as big of a deal, but I mean, sometimes there's a part where you've got to get called on the carpet, right? And it is what it is. You know, I would have taken the write-up. You want to write me up, but I needed you to leave, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Because for the greater good.
Right.
This isn't about
that was being held hostage. Yeah.
Exactly. This is for the greater good now. And and maybe, you know, you're not seeing it that way, but I have a responsibility to protect my people. And that's like where my motivation was coming from. Shannon, come on down, Shannon. Shannon Hetzel is one of our criminal justice majors. I hope I'm right in saying that. I think I am. And her dad is on the job. So Shannon's going to read a question for you from the chat.
So in the chat, Hannah, she asked, when your personal police tactics and investigations came into question, how did you deal with those situations?
Okay, you cut off at the very first part of that. Can you reread the first part of the question?
Yeah, they said, when your own personal police tactics and investigations came into question, how did you deal with those situations?
So I am going to go back to this thing that, you know, I have always done the best that I can to do the right thing. And I don't lie. I don't I don't do things that would ever, in my opinion, be considered questionable. But I can tell you that, I've sat through many a suppression hearing in court, and every single time it's always about your honesty, right? They want to call you on the carpet about things that you've done and things that you allegedly say, and I think, if I was ever questioned about my tactics, or if I was questioned about my procedures, I just remained calm and answered the questions. I will tell you, and this is true, I got in trouble years ago because I made a wrong decision on writing up one of my guys who broke a rule that everybody breaks, and somehow he got put on the radar, and I got in trouble for not writing him up. And I was wrong, and I admitted I was wrong, and I took my punishment, and that was the end of it, right? Like, I don't do anything in my professional dealings with the community that would be considered, I don't know, wrong tactics or illegal tactics, or anything that I would ever violate someone's rights or anything like that. But, I do make mistakes, and but when I do, I own them.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Thank you. Good question. Yeah. Great answer. Just so that the people who are watching understand, we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions. So we're going to do the best we can. And I'm going to call up Alex. Alex Suarez is also one of our criminal justice students, undergrads, and he's actually going to be going, I think, aren't you a senior? Am I right? Am I right, Alex? You're a senior, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So what's next for Alex is law school.
Oh,
and
nice.
we're all very proud of him. And Shannon too, I meant to say, Shannon as well is lawyers. So we've got these two lawyers in the family now, which is great. It's always good to have a lawyer in the family. Alex, what's the question that you're going to ask?
Good evening, Chief. This
Good
question comes from Kara Matera, and she asks, how were you able to deal with all the stress and pressures that come with this job?
Thank you. Good question. That is a good question. There are so many ways that people deal with stress when you're dealing with law enforcement, because, law enforcement, you've got, operational stress, you've got, occupation stress, organizational stress, you've got all these different kinds of stress that comes from all kinds of different places. And, I learned a long time ago, at least for me, I spent a lot of time with my kids. I tried not to do things like I didn't drink away my woes. I didn't eat away my woes. Like if I would have a really bad day, most of the time I'd go get on a bike and I would go ride my bike or whatever. You have to come up with something for you that is the healthiest way you can to beat stress. And all jobs have stress of different kinds, and it just is what it is. But, I've had nights, I'm not going to tell you. I've dealt with a lot of, really bad situations, and, I've gone home and cried. I was never ashamed of how I felt about things. I've allowed myself to get angry. Like, I think one of the biggest helpers for me is that I don't hide my feelings. And that's just who I am. Like, if I needed to go home and cry, I would go home and cry. If I needed to sit in my office and cry, I would sit in my office and cry. If I, dealt with a bad case, I would go, there were days, I remember days handling a case and walking into my boss and saying, I'll be back, and going out and just taking a walk. It just depended, but I made sure that I didn't keep things in. I think that creates a lot of mental health issues for people when they're, and I think that's one of the benefits though I will say, of being a female, because nobody thought much of me sitting in my office with my head in my hands crying because I just, watched a baby die. Like, nobody said anything. Like, it wasn't, I don't know that I had the same issues that men would have with those kind of things. I just didn't, I always found I did the best I could to find the healthiest ways to deal with it for me.
Yeah. And not taking it home is one way, right?
Yeah.
And I know that many of my cops, especially post 9/11, would not go home and talk about any of it with their family, out of protection for their family. And not so much like not wanting their family to see their weakness or their vulnerability, but more like they didn't want to scare their family.
Right.
And so they were protecting them. But then there's got to be an outlet. There's got to be some way that you can ventilate to somebody. And you see, that is where I believe the boss comes in. I think an effective leader sits down with his guys or girls and puts them in a circle, and it's like, how are you feeling?
How you feeling?
We've all been through a bunch of stuff just now. We like all walked into hell and back. And how are you doing? Let me check in with you right now. Let me take your emotional temperature.
Yeah, and what's fun?
That?
The art of the debrief, right, is important, right? Because I can tell you, and this is just a learning experience. As many deaths as I investigated and the young abuse cases and stuff, not one time did any of my commanders come to me and say, "How are you doing?" And so that was a learning thing for me as a leader and as someone who moved up the ranks. Like, I always made sure to say, let's talk about what just happened. Or just go to them and say, let's just blow this out, right? Let's go do something. And part of that was because that was never afforded to me. Like, I think in that respect, the people that I worked for previously just automatically assumed that you'd be all right? You're good, right? And there's a lot that a person can hide behind a smile and a laugh and a off-color joke or whatever. But, we had a situation today where one of my guys, we had a suicide or attempted suicide because my guy saved his life, cut him down and saved his life. He had tried to hang himself and he saved him. And first thing when he came back in, I walked at him like, "Are you okay? You okay?" And yeah, he was shaken up, but he was good, right? He did a good thing and he was good. But, I think that's also a new thing in law enforcement, is that we are taking account the mental health of our people differently than I think over the last 20 some odd years that we did. Officers get involved in shootings and we debrief them. We send them to talk to somebody. And now I think we are making progress in that, because it's okay, right? It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, that rapport that we have with our team, with our squad, with our command staff, whoever they are, like, so that rapport, that building trust, it goes both ways. It's about effective communication. It's about validating and honoring and respecting and cherishing each other. But at the same time, knowing when to discipline. So It's this, do I want to be feared or do I want to be loved? I mean, I guess if I always said I'd like to be, Michael Corleone, I want to be Michael Corleone. I don't care if they love me. I just want to do what I say. But and I'm joking, but kind of not joking. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's this balance, this balancing act that the leader has to do. Inspiring, motivating, coaching, mentoring, disciplining, monitoring, supervising, leading. All of that is part of leadership.
It's a lot. And, I always look at, and this may not be, they may not want to hear that I treat them like I do my kids, but, I kind of do, right? Like my kids know when they've crossed the line, but they also know that they can come to me with anything and we will figure it out. And so I kind of try to do the same thing. Like, there are rules and you will follow the rules. And if you don't, we will deal with it. And in the meantime, if you need me, I'm here. And that's how I like to do those things.
Yeah, exactly. We have time for I'm going to rescind what I texted you behind the scenes, Joey. So we're going to go with Tiffany and we're going to pick the last question because we're out of time. So Tiffany, if you want to come on, I would appreciate it. And this is also one of our criminal justice undergrads. Hopefully she's there. Where are you,
Hi,
Tiffany?
Dr. T. I'm on. It's just saying that the video is stopped because, I don't know, maybe you have a button.
Okay. I don't.
Oh, here we go.
I don't. Let's see. You got it? Yeah, there you go. All right. So let me let me spotlight you. You want to read the question?
Yes, perfect. I have a question from Sarah. It says, I just got promoted to supervisor, and one of the biggest challenges is that I am not only female, but a civilian. Do you have any advice on communicating effectively with my sworn counterparts?
Thank you, Tiffany. Good question.
Okay, so if you're a supervisor, you're a civilian supervisor over sworn people. I'm not exactly sure. That's kind of hard to answer without knowing your exact role. But one of the things that I will tell you is to do the best that you can to learn what they do and what they're doing. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is don't allow them. And I'm saying this because I'm a sworn person, right? And I don't know, being supervised by a civilian, how that works. But I can tell you that to stand, learn what they do the best that you can to make sure that you know the things that they're responsible for. Because just because you're not sworn doesn't mean you can't understand it, right? Keep communication open with them, with everyone. And again, be firm, but be fair. And if the other thing I'll tell you too is one of my favorite things is that if I don't know the answer, I'm okay to say I don't know. And then I'll find it for you. As a supervisor, one of the things you always want to do is make sure they know you've got their back, and that you're there to help them in whatever capacity it is that you are there to represent them. But take the time to learn what they have to do.
She's saying in the chat that let's see, she's a forensic supervisor, just to clarify.
Okay.
And they partner with officers. She's equivalent to a sergeant. Okay. Her chain of command is sworn, but her employees are civilians.
Got it. Okay. So I'm trying to think of the best way to, you're a civilian who's the rank of a sergeant. I guess. I think. Yeah,
I'll weigh in real quick. Yeah, because in NYPD we had a lot of that. We had some civilians, okay, and non-sworn members of the department who were in supervisory positions over police officers, and in some cases even over sergeants, and reported to lieutenants and captains, and there was this. I don't want to say. There was a distinction, right? So that if you were a civilian, there was a certain way you were viewed. Like it's almost like there was a little bit of a stigma there, right. Like not as valued, let's say, as sworn members. And then, of course, you have police officers that feel that they're the in crowd, and they're like on one side of the room, and you've got sergeants, lieutenants on the other side of the room. So there's all of this. It's not necessarily divisiveness as much as it is, I'm in my corner. I got my corner. These are
Mhm.
my people,
Sure.
and never the two shall meet kind of thing. So I
Right.
think that it's a dance you have to do. Sarah, I don't know if that's what I am describing for you, but I would say we're human beings first. And see, Chief, if you agree with me, we're human first, and we come to the table with talents and gifts and academic credentials and
Right.
training, and various work experience. We're not just like empty suits, so to speak, right? So we come to the table wherever we are, whether we're professors, whether we're administrators in an academic setting, doesn't matter whether you're a cop or a chief. I mean, that's the setting, and it has its own nuance. But who you are as a leader, as a person, as an effective listener, as someone who validates and someone who empowers your people, if you can operate that way, I think you will win.
Yeah. And the other thing too, thinking about this, like this is going to sound maybe like a strange example, but I'm going to give it to you. We have a homicide unit, and one of our we had a homicide one time, and our state's attorneys are the ones that make the major decisions when it comes to charging and what we do and things like that. So I always looked at them as like, I have to, not that they were my boss, but that they were kind of over us, no matter what level we were, and they were civilians. And we all had to come to this kind of agreement about understanding the other person's responsibilities. And you being in forensics, right? I have no freaking clue what you've got to do. And I remember taking our attorneys out with us on crime scenes because we needed them to understand what we were up against, right? So we would take them to the crime scene and we would take them to the arrest and let them watch it from the street. It gave them a different respect and a view of us as law enforcement. And then they would sit with us and they would go through all of the things that they had to do for suppression hearings and what was allowed and what was not, and trial prep and all these things that we wouldn't understand either because we're not attorneys, right? So when I look at that and I think of you in forensics, I would, as someone who works for you, would love to come in and look at everything you're responsible for and what you have to do and how I play a role in that. Because to me, that would make me look at you in a different level, not necessarily my supervisor, but as like it's a different animal, right? And I think that that's important. I think to know what everybody does is important.
Absolutely. And we're out of time. So I'm gonna give you the last word on anything that we've talked about tonight, or anything maybe that we didn't talk about that you would like to mention, and then I'm gonna do shameless plugging.
Okay. No, the only thing that I just want to say is that I hope that moving forward in law enforcement, that you all, or being a lawyer or whatever it is that you're going to do, that you remember the importance of people. And I think that that's where we have all kind of lost our humanity a little bit, is remembering that we are all human, and that we should all care about each other and take care of each other, no matter what walk of life you are from. And also that if you ever want to talk to me about anything or whatever, Dr. T knows how to get a hold of me. And I'm always willing to help or talk or whatever it is that you need. So with no problem.
Fabulous. 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 Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please be safe. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. It's Central Time now. So it's 7:20, way past your dinner time. So
it's almost my bedtime. What are you talking about?
Yeah, oh, that's right. We're gonna let you go, and we'll talk in the future for sure. Thank you again so much, and happy holidays.
Yeah, you too. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Chief. So let me shamelessly plug what's coming for next season, because we have it all lined up already, and I know that Joey can tell us as well, but I'm going to give Joey a break because Joey actually is he flew home today, so he must be very, very tired, and we're going to let him take a break. But let me just tell you what the lineup is for next season. And when I say next season, I mean January, starting in January. So on January 19th, we have disaster mortuary services and death notifications for mass casualties with forensic expert Dr. Sharon Plotkin and forensic anthropologist Dr. Teresa Lily White. We've had her before, call her the forensic bone lady. I don't think I call her that to her face, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, February 16th, we have Dr. Lenore Walker from the College of Psychology. She's going to talk about the case of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. And we're calling that show, Will the Real Victim Please Stand Up? In March 19th, I love this. I just love saying this. Maggots, Murder, and More. It's a forensic entomologist. She's a bug lady. So we got bone ladies, we got bug ladies. Anyway, she's a forensic entomologist, looks at insects. Dr. Adrienne Brundage, she's from the Department of Entomology at Texas A&M. She's a board certified forensic entomologist. She's going to be on our show. April, we have Dr. Vincent Van Hasselt. He's from the College of Psychology also. He is a well-known police psychologist, and he's going to center on police mental health. I'm very excited about that show in particular. And then finally, we wrap up in May 11th, with an alumni spotlight. Dr. Penny Brown Reynolds, she's one of our graduates. She attended our PhD in criminal justice program. She graduated with great honors. And the Biden administration has selected her to be the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Management Operations in the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. She is going to be on our show in May. And then don't forget that every month we also feature Ed Densel, Unfound, which is a missing persons podcast host that we always have on. So I want to thank again all of my students, everyone who is behind the scenes helping and doing all of the production stuff. I want to thank all of our students that have been watching, all of our PhD students and some of our undergrad students who have been on. Thank you so much to our dean, Dr. Kimberly Durham, Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice, Dr. Marcelo Castro, and Dr. Tammy Kushner for all their support. This is our last show for the season. Happy holidays, everybody. Please stay safe, be blessed, and we'll see you in January. Good night.